And that's just one of many of Biden's crimes. You had him actively lie about UNRWA and said that he saw evidence of UNRWA being terrorist, even though it was later revealed there was no evidence. You had Israel that tortured UNRWA staff and got tortured, obtained confessions. He used that to cut aid to UNRWA. He is an active participant in the genocide, providing diplomatic cover, providing all the weapons that Israel has used. And even though it may be good to see ICC charges against Netanyahu, it's a crime against humanity that Anthony Blinken and Joe Biden are not getting arrest warrants as well, because they are just as complicit. Absolutely no way, shape, or form should anyone support Joe Biden or you're giving AOK for genocide. There's nothing lower than that. But with that said, Jill Stein and the people on her campaign, they're doing their part in terms of resisting the establishment and the empire. We are seeing historic amount of people reject a duopoly. And I think this is what a lot of people forget. It's not about electoral politics leading to a revolution, but as revolutionaries, we take any opportunity to get people used to engaging in revolutionary actions. And we all have to play our role in the process, not just with our votes, but with our actions as well. My friends, my family, we are back once again. Welcome to RBN Live. We had a great conversation with Shama Sawan on Worker Strike Back. This is just a small clip of my appearance on her show. And if you're in Chicago, we are doing a mass call to action, actually across the nation, during the DNC convention, whether they cancel this convention or not, which I think they will, because it's going to be Vietnam era vibes, 1968 level vibes. And everyone knows it because you have activist organizations all over the country that's preparing some sort of action regarding Biden's genocide. The genocide that our state is sponsoring, that they're trying their best to keep out of mainstream public discourse. So whether they cancel the DNC convention or not, I think we all should hit the streets and have a mass showing and demonstrate to the world why they made that decision. I think that's a fantastic idea. I will be in Chicago and I will be giving a speech at the Worker Strike Back event. I will be present at any actions I can, not just covering on the ground at RBN, but as an activist myself. So if you are in the Chicago area, I need you guys to show out. I don't know what else it would take to get people to show out. We live in a society which is modeled as a police state, millions of people going homeless, and all our ruling class can talk about is going to war. It's endless war. They just now they're selling fighter jets to Israel. They just gave billions of dollars more to Israel, billions of dollars more to Ukraine. When will enough be enough for Americans? It's been enough for me. It's been enough for our generation. Like, you're seeing a record amount of young people who are no longer buying into this system. And we're going to talk about this more in detail with our guest, Midwestern Marx. They will be rolling here very soon. But think about it, guys. In my lifetime, I am 33 years old. There have been 3 complete economic crashes in my lifetime before I turned 30. Meanwhile, Gen Xers and boomers are like, why are the young people socialist? People wonder, why do I call myself a socialist even though it may hurt our YouTube channel doing that? It's easier to use euphemisms. Because we have witnessed this chaotic system that put profits over human life, over actual success, over actually successfully building a society. And then we're seeing this system crash over and over again by design. I am against the capitalist mode of production because the capitalist system is so inherently volatile and it crashes so often, they have a name for it. They call it the boom bust cycle. They're like, yeah, of course. They're like, what are you complaining about? Of course we crash every 5 to 7 years. It's part of the system. The workers did have to pay for it. They sacrificed the wealth they gained over the last few years, and then the rich get wealthier. Every time there's a crash, the rich and the wealthy gain significantly. We had a record amount of billionaires during the COVID pandemic crisis. During the 2020 economic crisis, that is what led to the boom of wealth of Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. It's called disaster capitalism. The boom bust cycle, workers struggling, millions unemployed, people getting their wealth wiped out, that's part of the system. You understand they get wealthier during the bust cycle? That's when they collect from the workers. Like, you think you're gonna benefit? They're like, you think you're gonna benefit? That's 2008. That's 2020. The dot-com crash 3 times. And I'm missing some minor shit. I'll just name the largest one. And I have my friend Carlos from Midwestern Marx. I see Noah is joining as well. I'm going to introduce you guys here very soon. I'm going to show you guys just the beginning of this. And I'm going to ask you guys at Midwestern Marx about why the younger generations are leaning more towards Marxism and socialism and not buying into the propaganda that many of the older generations did. There's still many people who are still afraid to be anti-capitalist, despite seeing the scam that our government constantly committing. So here's CNN complaining about it. Why aren't people falling for our propaganda no more? Why aren't young people falling for capitalist, imperialist propaganda no more? Because I covered this before, but I saw this segment, guys, and the tears was so hilarious. I had to show you guys. Because I covered the G7, and I'll show you guys the difference in popularity between Western leaders and those who are called authoritarian, like Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping, who are massively popular. Now look at this intro, and I'll bring my guests in here, where they lament the state of the West because the people who are victims of Western government are now turning against the ruling class because they know the ruling class in the West do not have their interests at heart. Let's play this, and I'll bring my guests in after this.
Well, I want to take a look at this year's G7 family photo, as it's known. Everyone highlighted is under major political pressure back home. It's less than a week since far-right parties dominated Europe's parliamentary elections. And these leaders' futures are now, at best, uncertain. Of course, G7.
You wanna know what's funny? I will bring my guests on this note. I think you guys gonna have fun watching this clip. You wanna know what's funny? When Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine, when NATO started their proxy war against Russia, they started the sanctions. There were so many Western pundits that were saying, "Is this the end of Vladimir Putin? Putin miscalculated. This is the end of Russia." How many stories have you guys seen at the beginning of this conflict like that? And since then, how many prime ministers have we gone through in the UK? We got snap elections in France. Italy prime minister took an L. Finland prime minister took an L. And as they're saying, we are seeing the establishment in Europe being upended. But with that thought, I want to introduce my guests. We got a lot to talk about. I got a lot to read this show. What's popping? I'm joining my friends at Midwestern Mark. It's great to have you guys back on the show. Amazing educators and activists. Thank you for joining us, Noah and Carlos from Midwestern Marx. Welcome to RBN once again, my friends.
Yeah, thanks for having us, brother. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always great to be in conversation with you guys, Noah and Carlos. I want to pass it to Noah since Noah chimed in first. I want to get back to this statement. God, trust me. There's so much cope here, but it's not just funny because I think there's a lot to analyze here. A lot that vindicates a lot of what I've been saying over the last few weeks. But 25 seconds in, I want to pass it to both Noah and Carlos about young people's feeling and what they call democracy, which is a joke. But what they're essentially talking about is young people not falling for the propaganda of the ruling class, the capitalist model no more. So I want to pass to you guys and for introduction. Thank you guys for joining us. Then we continue.
Yeah, well, it's it's easy to get taken in by propaganda when there's a giant middle class that's stable and able to get by, right? But that begins really deteriorating in our era. And this is something Carlos and I have worked out a theory to sort of explain that we call reproletarianization, right? The death of the middle classes. But young people specifically right now entering the workforce are looking around and saying, well, what they tell us doesn't match the world we see around us. So they begin looking elsewhere for answers, and first it came in the form of the Bernie movement seemed different. Even the Trump movement seems different. But after you go through that and you say, oh, well, actually it's just the same old thing, you go past it and you begin getting into things like Marxism.
Carlos, anything you want to add before I continue?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. One of the central insights from the Marxist tradition is that material conditions determine consciousness. The sort of ideas that we have are premised, their foundation is the social life that we exist in, which is historically determined. And when you've experienced the death of the middle classes as we have throughout the period of neoliberalism and neo-imperialism, and the general American public, all they find in their everydayness is impoverishment, indebtedness, and desperations. Their ideas the ideas that existed in previous periods are obviously going to change because the material conditions have fundamentally changed. And there's no security as there was in the period of the so-called golden age of capitalism. And therefore, what Americans are doing at the level of ideas is rocking the boat. What we see in our hands is a crisis of legitimacy. That's how political science refers to it, or a crisis of authority. No state, no matter how fascistic, can survive only on the basis of coercion. If you're just throwing the police out there and the military out there, you can't survive. You need to have a certain...
Yeah, again. That's a great quote, Carlos. That's a great quote.
You need to have a certain basic level of consent of, a large chunk of the population saying yes to the existing order and aligning their individual and class values with the trajectory of the ruling order. And what we're seeing is that only 11% of the American public approves of the media. That means that 89% distrust the media, the most important apparatus for ideological control of the ruling class. Right. They want to ban TikTok because its character is tubular. That means there's leakages of the truth. And, as Joseph Goebbels used to say about the Nazi state, I think it's fitting about the American state. The enemy of the state is the truth. And that's why they need to have this massive media apparatus to distort facts, to turn reality upside down and to lie to the people. And when their conditions are good, they accept it. When they're not, such as they are today, they reject it. They reject the political establishment. They reject the media. They're critical of the military-industrial complex, of the medical-pharmaceutical industrial complex, of all the major institutions of capital. And now is the best time to possibly be a communist because we're the only people that can explain why it is that their lives are shit and how it's within their power to change it and actually build a society that we're promised as Americans, a society where we have a government of, by, and for the people. You can't have that in a dictatorship of capital. Only socialism can give us that.
I want people to understand the destruction of the quote unquote middle class is the result of class war. Mm-hmm. Because the capitalists, they always need, they are never satisfied. They in the first quarter of this year, they may have broken a record, but what about the second quarter? Oh man, the first and second quarter was great, man, but this third quarter, woo. We got to see expectations. Got to come from somewhere and come from the middle class. And this is where a lot of Americans are misled. And I think there's a lot of practical application for the term middle class. But I think a lot of Americans have been misled. There have been surveys that show that people who make from $300,000 a year, from $30,000 a year, they all call themselves middle class. The fuck is that about? Right? If you ask anyone, you ask motherfucker with a Rolls Royce, a fucking mansion, yeah, I'm part of the middle class. You ask a single mother with 3 kids struggling, yeah, I'm middle class. And I want people to understand how the capitalist class use this term rhetorically, because they want to convince everyone they're part of the middle class so they don't engage in class warfare. Mm-hmm. And the concept of the middle class, especially now, is dead. You're a worker. When you ask what class you are, you don't say middle class. You say you are a part of the working class. You say that with your chest. You guys have any thoughts on that, Carlos, Noah?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like, we know it's dead, but we mean dead in a very specific sense. Because then there's Tweedledee and Tweedledum who come around and say, oh, but look at this person. They're middle class, or they earn this much and they live comfortably like they did in the past. When capitalism is developing and Marx is writing about it, he says self-earned private property has died. That's not fully true. They're still individuals. It has died as the dominant form of existence, of the dominant form of property existence that the vast majority of people existed under. It gave way to monopoly capitalism, to industrial capitalism, etc. What we have with the middle classes is the fact that even the meaning of middle class, the traditional bourgeois meaning, it means that half of the population, this half of the population is making a medium income. The medium income of the whole population, half of the people are making. And that's not the case. What we've seen is the complete polarization of American society, where the vast majority are indebted, impoverished, desperate, figuring out how to make ends meet, and a small group of people are getting richer than ever. And those are the people, of course, in the pockets of our politicians.
Well, it's like even the words, the words middle class, like you're saying, Nick, like they just drop the word all over the place, right? But for Marxism, it has something of a different meaning, more literal, right? It's actually, if we look at the classes that are generally forming within capitalist society, you have the owners, the leeches that do nothing and extract all the value created by those who work. And then you have people somewhere between that, right? That in America, we had this really interesting thing happen in the interwar period. Our state itself sort of becomes a capitalist in a way, right? It's lending money to all of Europe and collecting these war debts. It owns the most gold in the world, etc. And this creates a big centralization of capital. At the same time, there's militant class struggle going on. I mean, we're talking about this is leading into the Depression era, right? And so there's an actual centralization winning concessions from them possible. This creates a working sort of middle class that is able to win stability and able to win home ownership, etc. Now, knowing a little bit about history, this is also the Jim Crow era, right? So the Black community is specifically left out of this. And it takes what we call another whole revolution, the civil rights, to win that possibility. And until Jim Crow was overthrown by Martin Luther King's revolution, that was impossible. And so now it lays the groundwork for now. Fast forward to now, though, we've arrived at this place where the state becoming a capitalist has existed during the era of deindustrialization and globalization, right? The economy of America, and I'm kind of rambling, so I apologize, ends up being based on this very hollow dollar that's no longer backed by gold, right? So as we see the dollar zone shrink with the rise of BRICS, China, Russia, etc., we're seeing the American economy shrink, right? Because it has to. There's nowhere else for it to go. And are they going to take those losses themselves? Of course not. They need to keep expanding for that next quarter you were talking about, every single minute of every single day. And so all of those losses are put onto us, right? But we have to keep spending at the same time. They need a buying end of the market. That's what America was designed to be, or specifically white America during Jim Crow, right? But in order to continue that, we start getting thrown debt, right? Debt for college, debt for a car, debt for a house, debt for debt. Everything is debt, 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 debt.
Yeah, well said. And I always share this because it always surprises people. And this is why whenever I saw progressives, people who consider themselves left of liberalism, which they're really not, because I see many like Bernie crats, like Bernie liberals, people who are to our right, but they claim they're for class war, who will say shit like, you know, the child tax credit lifted X amount of people out of poverty. I'm like, what metrics are you using? Do you guys understand that under our system of low expectations set by capitalists, that if you are a single mother with 2 kids and you make $24,000, you're technically out of poverty? In what universe does that make sense? Do you guys see how the capitalists actually benefit from setting standards of low expectations? And how many liberals have said this? And how many times have you guys heard this, Carlos and Noah, where they say, how many people Biden lifted out of poverty? Which shows why we should never use their metrics, because despite all this bluster, this is the reality of what we're dealing with. Do you guys know the average salary in China in US dollars is $49,000? They only pay $500 in rent. Meanwhile, the top half of the United States is $35,000, and we're paying thousands and thousands of dollars for rent. When will Americans wake up to the scam? When will they get on anywhere near the same level of anger I'm at, that you're at? It's one of the biggest scams. Go ahead, Noah.
I think it's happening. I think that's what you're talking about, all the people getting interested in Marxism. Even the wrong ideas is at least a sign people are looking for an answer. You know, also, depending on what actual study you're looking at, between 60 and 80% of Americans work paycheck to paycheck, and they don't have enough savings to afford a $500 emergency. That's insane, right? Marx in Capital, he goes to great lengths to explain how the process of capital accumulation and value being produced and then realized creates this giant and ever-growing proletariat, right? That is always thrust down to this level. In that era of the middle classes I was talking about, it papered over the contradiction for a little bit, but it's coming back with a vengeance now. And I don't know, I walk around as pissed as you are all day. I don't know how I get any work done at all, but somehow I manage.
That's not true. Noah's barely ever pissed. He's such a nice guy. But no, I think maybe more cynically, I think it's good that they're saying that. Because what are they doing if not disconnecting themselves from the people? What the people experience is constant hardship in their everydayness. And then they have the politicians on the screen have the audacity to say, look at how much we have improved things. When all they have felt is the same tendency of decline in every single presidency, whether it's Biden, Trump, Obama, or Bush. It's just been decline for American working families. And I think a lot of them are getting angry. But they're getting angry in ways that are telling of the ideology of the system, right? They get angry with the terms that they have in front of them, with the lexicon they have in front of them, and there's different forms that dissent is taking. I think to a certain extent, some of the working people in the Midwest that are MAGA, they see that as a form of dissent, just like the Bernie movement was a form of dissent. There's a lot of people that are just apolitical, that are not voting, and that absence of voting is a form of dissent, is a real distrust of the system. And I think that what our task is as Marxist communists, however we want to call ourselves, as people who can see clearly the systematic character of these ills that regular working people experience, our task is helping them make sense of it. Everyone wants to make sense of the problems that they have in front of them. No one wants to have a problem in front of them and have a half-ass explanation for it. If you come with a better explanation, if you're able to help them make sense better of their ills, they're going to go for it, the vast majority of them. And so our task is to go to these people, understand where their dissent is starting from, the various common sense, spontaneous worldviews that they have, find the rational kernels through which we can explain what is wrong in terms that they would understand, slowly but surely get them to socialist class consciousness, and in the process get all the different forms of dissent, give them coherence, give them unity. And once you have that shared understanding, you can give it direction. Because part of understanding what's wrong is also a positive component within it, which is understanding how you can fix it. And it's in our hands to fix it. And that's a very hopeful message. So yes, everything's crumbling. But as Ma used to say, chaos has reigned in heaven. The situation is perfect. It's beautiful. When chaos is reigning, that's when our people can most easily see that it is in their hands to construct a world anew, a world that is shaped in their image as working people.
Well said. I'm going to play this video. I'm going to let it continue.
A look at this year's G7 family photo, as it's known. Everyone highlighted is under major political pressure back home. It's less than a week since far-right parties dominated Europe's parliamentary elections. And these leaders' futures are now, at best, uncertain. Of course, G7 is always touted as the leaders of the world's biggest or leading democracies. Well, meantime, the summit's host, right-wing Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, appears on the most stable political ground. She's the only G7 leader bolstered by those recent election results. Well, my next guest, Ruth Ben-Ghiat, is a professor of history at New York University and the author of Strongman, Mussolini to the President. She joins us now live from New York. It's good to...
Do these motherfuckers have anyone else that they can talk about history with? And I know you guys don't watch corporate media like me. I have a problem, guys, because what I do, I watch way too much corporate media, doing oppo research, planning my shows, that kind of stuff. And if you watch corporate media, you see this chick everywhere. This lady who wrote this strongman, authoritarian leader book, she's a professional propagandist from MSNBC, from CNN. Everyone consistently brings her on like there's no one else to talk about authoritarianism about. Like the same way with Jordan Chang. You know the guy who said that China was falling for 25 years now. The motherfucker Jordan Chang has been predicting the fall of China for 25 years. And they still keep bringing him on as if he's the only motherfucker qualified to talk about China. And she's the same thing. And I'm bringing this up because I know you guys don't watch it like I do. I promise you guys, she is fucking everywhere. And when I was doing Oppo, when I first listened to this segment, I literally I can't believe how many times you would see her on these damn shows. Feel free, you want to interrupt anytime, guys, if you guys want to chime in. No, I saw you on mute. Go ahead.
My question is, at what point, after they're wrong, do they just stop listening to them, right?
Right.
Like, how can you be so wrong and still get a job like that? Well, we know how that can happen, right? But it's a recycling of an old anti-communist narrative. Started way back in the interwar period where they were trying to compare Soviet communism to fascism. They were trying to build that bridge with all their might. And they came up with the term totalitarianism was a big one, right? That was Hannah Arendt's turn, if I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. But also there was the Adorno one, right? And this is what I think is where she comes from. Adorno wrote this book, and he was part of the Frankfurt School, which is a sort of CIA and capitalist class backed institute for social research, right? He writes this book called The Authoritarian Personality, saying that strong men and somehow Stalin is the same as Hitler.
Yeah, and that's what she does. No, I'm glad he brought that up because whenever you see these see corporate media or anyone from the establishment prop up a quote unquote historian or like it's always just a propaganda. She's literally a propagandist. Look, she's the author. I'll let you finish now. I'm sorry to cut you off, but you see, she wrote a book called Strongman Mussolini to the Present. And what she does, she take Mussolini and she compare all Republicans to Mussolini. She compare all the enemies of the United States, like Putin, Xi Jinping, Kim Jong-un. She compares them as the authoritarian because she's an expert in authoritarianism. But go ahead, Noah.
It's unreal how they can just say this, and you can always tell when they're talking out of their ass because they'll imply that they've read these people's minds, right?
Yeah.
Like, they hunger for power, and it's always like, I can see inside this person's mind. I know exactly the way they think. No, you don't. You're not a wizard. Get out of here, right? But so like, what? It's funny. Bill Foster, one of the legendary union organizer and communist in America, he used to say that a bourgeois history lesson is a confused jumble of random names and dates, right? Because that's all it is. But anyway, Adorno wrote this book that I'm sure she's drawing from, where he basically says that there's just a personality type of authoritarian, right? And so if you like team sports, you're probably more authoritarian. If you like uniforms, you're probably it's the silliest nonsense.
They have no idea what authoritarianism is, and when you hear them explain it, it's like they're children.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Carlos.
It's the silliest stuff, and these are like super respected academics for some reason.
It's purely abstract thinking, whether it's the question of democracy, freedom, dictatorship, whatever it is. They have not the capacity to think concretely, to ask the question, well, freedom for whom? Authoritarianism against whom? For whom? Democracy for whom? They can't ask those concrete questions. And this is just the foundation of liberal thinking, bourgeois thinking. But I think what's funny is that what I'm probably not going to see in this segment is a juxtaposition of this dwindling state of the G7, where most of the politicians are, of course, in a very unlikable position by the general public, a juxtaposition to the G7 meeting and to the presidencies, to the different summits that are going on in the BRICS orbit. For instance, the St. Petersburg Economic Forum that just happened a little bit over a week ago, where 59 countries applied to join not just BRICS, but the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and also the Eurasian Economic Union, where the presidencies of those countries of the global majority are overwhelmingly popular, especially the leading countries like Russia, China, Iran. You're not going to see any of that. You're not going to see the fact that in this war that the West has waged against Russia, instead of debilitating Russia, as you were mentioning earlier, Russia's going to fall, it's been the complete opposite. Russia has been able to raise itself up to the fourth leading country in purchasing power parity, the fourth largest economy in the world. So you're not going to see the contrast where, yes, they show you this world is dying, but they have to completely distort this other world that's actually rising and that's flowering and leading us into a radically new form of geopolitics, international relations, and ultimately world.
Yeah, and all the people who say, and I'll pass right to you, Noah, but you see all the geopolitical experts, like the 5 people you see, and guys, I watch a lot of this. I promise you, they have 4 to 5 people on rotation among CNN and MSNBC because they have to trust you. You have to know the script, and you gotta be an expert at empire at propaganda. That's why I bring this up. That's why I bring up Jordan Chang up. Every Chinese segment you see on Fox News, Jordan Chang is on like 90% of it. Because they screen these people and they have to regurgitate this mindless propaganda, or else you won't be allowed into the club. But go ahead, I know you want to chime in.
No, you're absolutely right. You know how many international news stations call us and ask us for interviews? All over the world, right? But corporate media in our own country, not a word. Not a single word. They just go to these same few people. But I have a question for you regarding this whole authoritarianism and all of these people being so just completely unpopular. Have you ever had someone try to turn that around on you? I see this from time to time in the mainstream media where they're like, well, this is good that our politicians are all incredibly unpopular. That means we're free to hate them. The most topsy-turvy
It's so ridiculous. You guys have the freedom to hate your ruling class. They're not going to do anything for you, but at least you can hate them. It's absurd. But let's get back to this video because there's going to be a lot to say here. Once again, she's she's an approved Western propagandist from multiple, like she's well known in the establishment. Wrote this bullshit book, and now they're going to introduce her to explain why young people are souring on democracy. Once again, this cope is hilarious. Let's get back to it.
Meloni appears on the most stable political ground. She's the only G7 leader bolstered by those recent election results. Well, my next guest, Ruth Ben-Ghiat, is a professor of history at New York University and the author of Strongman, Mussolini to the Present. She joins us now live from New York. It's good to have you. You've written extensively about authoritarianism, and I just wonder, as you watch the right gain ground.
Oh yeah, sorry. Another point. I'll be really quick because I want this segment to continue. But you guys see how they said there's a lot of far right gains in Europe, and you guys know I'm a fucking nerd, and I'm very particular with political terms. I'm like, what do you mean? Emmanuel Macron is pretty far right. So if you are funding a genocide like Germany, like the UK, like Joe Biden, and you're funding neo-Nazis in Ukraine, how does it get farther right than you? I'm not denying Don't get me wrong. I'm not denying the far right presence of many people like the Prime Minister of Italy, the Prime Minister, or the President of Argentina, whatever they call them. They're legitimately real far right threats. But I don't like, especially in the modern age, what's the difference between this quote unquote far right wing versus neoliberal fascism? So Emmanuel Macron, Le Pen, they all gonna fund neo-Nazis.
Right?
They all funding. Go ahead, Noah.
They're all the same thing. It's two sides of the same coin. And more in our era, we're seeing this sort of political realignment where people are looking at what they were told left and right is and going, I don't see a difference. Like Carlos always says, there's nothing more fascist than a genocide. Right?
Exactly.
If you're funding a genocide,
further right than that.
Right?
And the phrase you just used, Nick, neoliberal fascism, is so on point, because what we've seen in the period of neoliberalism is the privatization, austerity, liberalization, deregulation. That back in the day when capitalism went into crisis, it brought the fascists in for. So neoliberalism is it worked hand in glove with fascism because it's brought about what we would bring fascist governance in for back in the day. Except it did it without the fascist label. But it's the essential substance of what fascism is, and its connection as a form of governance to capitalist political economy. We've seen basically the same thing in the whole period of neoliberalism. So as a category, to speak about someone within the so-called liberal sphere of the spectrum as just centrist or liberal, and then someone in the right as fascist or far right, it makes no sense, because the whole form of governance, the modus operandi of capitalist governance since the crisis of the 1970s has been almost indistinguishable with fascism in many instances. The only difference is the questions of wokeism, of like sexuality. Like, are you cool? If you're cool with gays, you're left. It doesn't matter if you support genocide and Nazis. If you're not cool with gays, you're right. That's it. And that's an absurd way to look at politics.
Yeah, you guys see how I'm using this segment essentially to talk about theory. I'm sparing you guys, trust me. That's to me the only value of showing you guys this, because I want to show you guys how wrong the establishment gets it. I want to show the working class of this country how different our ideology is from them. That's the only reason I show you guys these segments, guys. I know sometimes y'all like, why are you watching this show? I'm a nerd. I am a nerd, and I am here with intellectuals. And this is a great time for us to explain what these term means and explain exactly how they're doing propaganda. So I'm greatly enjoying myself. I know we're going a little bit long in the segment, but this is the only value of us breaking this down, is to show you guys just how fucking wrong they are, how different they think from us, and how they are tricking people. What's poppin', Sarah from DD Geopolitics? We just had them on. I was on their show not too long ago. We definitely gonna see Sarah back on again. Thank you for the $20. What she shouts out RBN and Midwestern Marx. She said, love you guys. I appreciate what DD Geopolitics is doing. I know Sarah personally, but they're a collective of anti-imperialists at DD Geopolitics. Big shout out to them. Let's continue this segment. Feel free to interrupt anytime. This segment going a little longer than I planned, but I think this is good. This is a good intellectual discussion. So let's continue.
Before let me just say, you're a hero for doing that for all of us. I could not. I just couldn't watch mainstream media that much, man.
It's like watching a nature documentary to me. Like, you know how you watch a lion hunt? You watch a lion hunt. I see John Bolton on CNN. I'm like, this is a master propagandist in this natural setting.
Right. Look, my wife and I watched the 2 documentaries about that billionaire guy who murdered his wife and then some other people, the Jinx, Yeah. And I'm like, I'm going to find some insights into the mind of this crazy bourgeois killer guy, right? That's how I view you watching this.
Yeah, I know, and this is how I know who's on our side, because I was catching these NATO left Bernie-crats red-handed, and I fell for a lot. And I wouldn't say I fell for it, but I didn't know a lot of these people were my enemy back in my Bernie days, because I wasn't watching corporate media, right? And then in my time as a citizen journalist, as I start watching more critically, analyzing it, I will look at these Bernie motherfuckers. I will look like Nina Turner, Cori Bush, all these people, and I'm like, you are repeating exactly what I heard on MSNBC. Shut the fuck up, especially during the Ukraine thing. I literally caught them red-handed. so many times, just repeating the script I just heard on Morning Joe. And I probably wouldn't have caught that before because I didn't know what the establishment was saying. So I would see what the mainstream media is saying. I would see what corporate media is saying. Then I would see Anna Kasparian. Then I would see Sam Cedar repeating the same fucking thing. Like, the fuck is going on? But anyway, let's continue. You gotta see how absurd. We haven't even really got to the meat of the segment yet because you're gonna see exactly why they bring this propagandist on every time they need to talk about the concept of authoritarianism, or essentially why you should hate the enemies of the military-industrial complex.
It's good to have you. You've written extensively about authoritarianism, and I just wonder, as you watch the right gain ground in many places around the world, but we've just been looking very specifically at the European sphere with the election results there. How serious do you think the threat is at this point?
Threat of what?
I think, we should never discount it.
Not that rhetorically, threat of what? The threat of a genocide? Like, what else are we? The threat of poverty? The threat of homelessness? Like, what? How did it get worse? I need you to be very specific. But sorry, I'll let it continue. But you guys, they trigger me a lot. Let's continue.
We should never discount it. And as somebody who studies right-wing authoritarianism, I'm the last person to do that. The gains of the National Rally Party in France and the gains in Germany are indeed disturbing. And of course, there is now the GOP in America, which is embedded in these far-right networks, very close to Orban and his party. And so there's sustenance being given to the far right from this situation that many thought would never happen, which is that one of two parties in our bipartisan democracy has become an autocratic party.
Only one of two, Noah. Only one of two, Carlos. You guys see why they love Ruth? You guys see why these quote-unquote historians, they're essentially just duopolists. They're propagandists for one or two parties. I see it all the time on Fox News as well. They'll bring some right-wing historian on to explain why we should promote trickle-down economics. They're just this is why I revoke doctorate degrees. I revoke masterates. That shit means nothing to me. That if you have a degree that is not a STEM degree, that shit's not math and science, that shit means nothing to me at this point. But go ahead, Noah. I know
you know what we call it where I work? We call it buying pieces of paper from the bank. That's it. That's all you're doing. You're buying pieces of paper. Big deal. Not impressed.
It's like a degree from one of the slaves in Plato's cave that's looking at the shadows. You just got super good at like analyzing the world through shadows and lies. But
Yeah.
you know what's interesting? It's like even if you take it on their own terms, which is an interesting exercise to do philosophically, like take it on their own terms and see if on their own terms their conclusions follow. Even if you accept the idea that there's these centrist neoliberal governments that are under threat from the far right, the question is never asked, where does that far right come from? What are the conditions for the possibility of the emergence of this horrible threat you're claiming is coming into existence? Is it not the form of governance that actually exists? Is it not the thing you're claiming is necessary to defend against the far right that is actually producing it? That's the sort of operation that's never done. It's the same thing with the Democrats. The Democrats, we know why, but the Democrats never ask themselves the question, what are the conditions that we produced in conjunction with the mainstream Republicans that led to the rise of Trump? If they actually consider Trump to be this horrendous evil that breaks through the regular evils of the establishment, you have to ask that question. But they never do. So, we have to question and reject their own terms. But even within their own terms of discourse, we see a plethora of logical inconsistencies in their reasonings.
Yeah, let's continue. It's going to get even more hilarious. Feel free to chime in if you have any thoughts. I think this is a great opportunity to discuss theory and show how Americans are brainwashed. Let's continue.
GOP in America, which is embedded in these far-right networks, very close to Orban and his party. And so there's sustenance being given to the far right from this situation that many thought would never happen, which is that one of two parties in our bipartisan democracy has become an autocratic party. very connected to the far right. And so this is part of the global situation now.
Bro, she said, and I'm going to let it continue here, but in her answer, this historian, this professor said absolutely nothing enlightening. Every single guest I have had on over the last 2 to 3 months, actually, fuck it, since the beginning of in the history of RBN, would have gave a better answer than this person who is invited everywhere on corporate media. But let's continue.
Many of those that Tony was speaking to in what is his extensive reporter about the Donald Trump base, those who are determined that they will vote for Donald Trump in 2024, is that the US, they say, was never a democracy, which of course is blatantly untrue. But last week's European election...
What? She's like, man, all these people who are enabling Trump, which, once again, this is a lie, because the people who are outside of the duopoly, the people who they consider Trump enablers, they will consider Jill Stein voters that. They will consider anyone who don't vote for Joe Biden as the people who are clearly wrong that U.S. democracy the U.S. is not a democracy. I won't play this part again for emphasis. I'll pass to you guys for reaction, because this part right here, this is just unapologetically... This is bad propaganda, not even good propaganda, because it's so in your face.
Is that the US, they say, was never a democracy, which of course is blatantly untrue. But
wait, this is what okay. The only thing I think she might be referring to is the weird libertarians that go, well, we're actually a constitutional republic, not a democracy, right? That's the only thing I can think of that she's referencing. But if they're actually saying we were never a democracy, they're right.
Yeah.
We were never a democracy. Democracy for who? To do what? Right? Democracy for a handful of people to decide and manage ruling class affairs isn't the empowerment of the people that actual genuine democracy is.
Right, I couldn't agree more. Like, that sentiment is right. It's if you look at the etymology of democracy, what democracy actually means: demos, common people, not just people in general, common people, and kratos means rule, the capacity to have power, to exert force. Democracy is just socialism. It's like, etymologically, if you really think, it's just a synonym for social. So the people are right in saying, there hasn't been democracy in the U.S. And what's happening is that the contradictions are heightening to such an extent today that what's being questioned is not just the apparatuses of the ruling institutions today, but also what those same apparatuses have told us about the past. And that's where sentiments such as "we've never been a democracy" begin to arise. Because if they were able to get 2 and 2 together for today, it's so much easier to get it going for the past, and to realize that the same ruling interests that lie to us today have been lying to us forever, because it's their business to lie. They can't survive if they don't lie and manipulate and keep us brainwashed with their topsy-turvy version of reality.
You can predict who's going to win an election at around a 97% rate based on who raised the most money. That is what you call a capitalist dictatorship.
Mm-hmm.
In this country, until like the 1920s or 1930s, someone who's an actual historian can fact check me, I don't remember exactly the year, you have senators who was unelected. Like, a lot of people don't actually know American history. You guys know senators who was unelected for like our first 100 years?
Mm-hmm.
They were selected by the rich. And they were very open about why they did this. They selected Senate by the rich, and Senate was a branch of government in order to block any action or any legislation that would benefit the proletariat. The Senate as an institution was designed as a check to stop working class gains. In no universe have we ever been a democracy. But you guys see how she said, if you say we're not a democracy, that's blatantly untrue. Now who's actually spreading disinformation? Now,
this goes all the way back to before the founding of the republic. This question of democracy and how much power the people should have, and the question of what they used to call Jeffersonian democracy, right? The Whigs versus the Federalists. And if you read the Federalist Papers, Federalist Paper number 10 is written by Madison, right? And he specifically is talking to the land owning sort of they would call them the organic aristocracy versus the blood aristocracy, but the elites, right? The ruling class. And he's saying, don't even worry about this sort of formal democracy we're setting up, because we are going to be able to set regular working people up against each other and play them off each other, and they won't even realize we're stealing everything. They will never challenge our power because we'll set them against each other based on race. We'll set them against each other based on religion, based on everything. You know, it's crazy. They spell it out. They spell it out.
Yep. Let's continue this segment. Did you with us, especially since Midwestern Marx are working class intellectuals? I love to discuss these theories. This segment is a gold mine for us. You guys see how it's just layup after layup. But I think it's important to explain these terms because so many Americans are completely confused. So let's continue this. And then I have a segment that we're going to do regarding NATO, where NATO essentially threatening nuclear war. NATO now throwing a tantrum, threatening China because they failed to defeat Russia and Ukraine. So that's our next segment. We're just going to do these two segments today. We begin to wrap up, but that's coming up next, guys. And I'll read super chats in between, though. So anyone who got the super chat, I will get to that after this segment. So let's continue. This segment is a fucking gold mine of bullshit liberalism. Let's continue.
Speaking to in what is his extensive reporter about the Donald Trump base, those who are determined that they will vote for Donald Trump in 2024, is that the US, they say, was never a democracy, which of course is blatantly untrue. But last week's European election really underscored this trend of right-wing populism and what many see as a threat to democracy, particularly that sort of liberal democracy upon which...
So people voicing and implementing their opinion in a political structure, even the one I don't agree with, is not democracy? How can you say it's a threat of democracy? People engage in democracy. These people say democracy, essentially anyone who engaged in politics that disagree with me is a threat to democracy. The narcissism of the modern Western liberal. Anyone who don't agree with them is a threat to democracy. If you don't vote for Joe Biden, you're a threat to democracy. Anyway, let's continue, because I still got a lot to get through.
The sort of EU was founded. I want to bring up some data from a report done by Cambridge University in 2020. And the line in purple highlights millennials.
It's a good pause point. Look at this graph, because I don't trust her to break it down well. You have the silent generation who still have a lot of satisfaction with quote unquote democracy, and it get worse as people get younger. And then when you look at millennials, it's like literally in a toilet. And Gen Z is so unsatisfied with democracy, they said we leaving these motherfuckers off the graph because that shit will even be on here. So this is a good flashpoint about how our generations realize how our system failed us. But let's continue.
Satisfaction with democracy. It's the lowest of any group in history. And the report found by their mid-30s, more than 50%, 55% of global millennials say they are dissatisfied with democracy. And millennials make up more than 20% of the global population. I was really struck by this.
I want to point this out. Thank you, Comment. This is a great point. I didn't really acknowledge this at first, but when you look at this graph, you guys see how they try to make it actually look better for the West? Look, the top line is 55%. Thank you. Let me give them a shout out, because I actually didn't realize that till now. Thank you for this comment, because look, you guys see how they actually try to make it better for the European Western states? The top line percentage is 55%, which means at the best case scenario, half of even the older generations don't trust democracies. So as they're trying to make it about generation war, oh my God, look at the young people, so stupid. They don't trust democracy. It's actually everyone of all ages. That's actually a great point, but let's continue.
Millennials make up more than 20% of the global population. I was really struck by this. What do
Can you pause it real quick,
the
Nick?
trend?
she was struck by this. She's struck by it, right? Like you can the approval rating of what it's just what people are told democracy means, right? You can track that to the standard of living dropping. Of course, people are dissatisfied. That's the easiest thing to predict in the entire world. Shit gets bad. People are unhappy with it. No kidding, right?
Yeah. Let's continue. I'm gonna hear from her. I still have to cover the Putin story. Feel free to interrupt me anytime. I want to hear from her at least one more time. This whole segment is a gold mine, but I cut it off around 5 minutes because we be here all day. This segment is fucking hilarious. They're so out of touch and they're so smug. They don't even realize it, but let's continue.
50% of the global population. I was really struck by this. What do you believe is driving the trend?
I think it's important to highlight that because we're in a situation where we need to take a very close look at how dissatisfied liberal democracy has left people, in part by going in a neoliberal direction, which
bro, she actually made a good point here. When I first watched this segment, I was in shambles because out of all times I ever heard her speak, this is the first time she ever made a good point in her life, but she don't connect the dots. That's the problem. Well, she's like, yeah, actually, I think it's the neoliberalism, the harsh capitalism that's causing this. Maybe let's continue because it's actually a very, very rare good point from her.
Going in a neoliberal direction, which is taking away safety nets, leaving people lonely. There are polls around the world, for example, Afrobarometer and Latino Barometer. These are continental-wide polls that show the same thing you're finding, that 30% of people think that democracy has failed them in some way. And this is what's driving the trend to these populist and authoritarian movements that
no shit, liberal Susie. What did every communist told you? Every single communist and socialist told you guys that liberalism enables fascism by implementing economic models that leave people desperate, which make them more likely to support a far-right figure. It will lead people more likely to support extremist ideologies. But the problem with liberal Becky here is that she pretends that this neoliberal scourge is the doing of Republicans. Who wrote the bankruptcy bill, Susan? Who literally broke this rail strike, Susie?
Who signed NAFTA?
Go ahead.
And
I was just saying,
and we have to remember that neoliberalism, when people are dissatisfied with neoliberalism, it isn't just a form of governance. It isn't just a form of governance. It isn't just the will of a generation of politicians in the West. It's a necessary stage of the development of the capitalist mode of life. When they say they're dissatisfied with neoliberalism, that means they're dissatisfied with the whole capitalist mode of life, because neoliberalism wasn't just this arbitrary thing that Thatcher and Reagan said, let's do this. And then everyone was dumb enough to go along with it. It was a necessary route for capitalism to survive after the horrendous crisis of the 1970s. Neoliberalism is the stage that capitalism had to take in order to continue surviving and existing as capitalism. So when people are dissatisfied with it, they're dissatisfied with the whole capitalist system.
And I'm going to go slightly off topic because these comments always are weird. Because I see these every once in a while, and it's weird. And I gotta cut this off now because it's becoming a thing. It is becoming annoying because it's almost like you guys have bad memory. Quick question, guys. Who was the guest on Jimmy Dore's show when Jimmy was doing a lot of those COVID segments, dismantling the COVID narrative? Who was right there with him? Who was right there with them and explained why the left need to support mandates? Who was on the you know how much shit I got for going on Jimmy's show and dismantling the left on their takes on COVID? So there are these people who keep making up this narrative because I think they jealous of me. I don't get it. There are these people who keep making this narrative up that I was a COVIDian. Like, I was on Jimmy's show discussing COVID, you idiots. The fuck y'all? Like, I be seeing these comments. I'm like, what are you talking about?
COVIDian.
Like, literally, these people just be making shit up. But anyway, let's continue. But I see these every once in a while. It's literally absurd.
We get the same thing. Listen, we get the same thing. Like it's crazy.
I think it's people on the right who try to disrupt the left, to be honest, because it's so ridiculous to go after the guy who was literally on Jimmy's show that was talking about. Because I see it all the time where people are like, "Oh, you guys know Nick was a COVIDian? You guys know Nick puts lockdowns? Nigga, you can search my tweets." Anyway, let's finish this segment up, and we'll cover some Ukraine, and we'll wrap up no longer than 90 minutes into this live stream. Let's continue.
Know how to create a sense of community. Now, the sad thing is that authoritarian governance tends to be very dysfunctional because these leaders only care about themselves. And in fact, the European elections, there's a counter trend going on that in places where either like Poland, which recently got rid of its far right parties, people were highly dissatisfied. They were taking away, abortion rights. The new Civic Coalition, progressive centrist, got 37% of the vote. And in Hungary, where there's a sitting autocrat, a new opposition party got 31% of the vote, which is the same as the far right party got in France. So there's also a counter wave of anti-authoritarianism building by people who have found the actual experience of being governed by authoritarians is not good.
This is someone who has no idea what she's talking about. This is someone who's just making shit up as she goes. She is selected not because she's intelligent. She is chosen by CNN and MSNBC because they had confidence that she will do the propaganda. And there's a lot more in that segment, but for a second time, I'll cut it off there. Carlos and Noah, any final thoughts on people's... and the overall theme of this segment was the misconceptions around authoritarianism, their propaganda around it. Any last thoughts? Let's start with Carlos, and then we go with Noah this time.
I think part of what sells is the image. You have an extremely high production value, a beautiful studio, a lady with a $600 haircut, expensive suits, pearl earrings, and it's got this image, this branding of legitimacy. But the substance is so ridiculous. It's like caveman level arguments, It makes no sense. Democracy good. What's democracy? Whatever we say, democracy. Everything else is autocracy. Everything else is authoritarianism. It's completely absurd. It's blind. It's clear for the vast majority of people that it's not doing the job it's supposed to do, that they're just the lapdogs of the elite and not the guard dogs, which is what the journalists are supposed to be, which is what Nick does and what we do and what other people within our orbit do, which is actually question those in power, not just faithfully trumpet whatever thing they want us to in order to legitimize war and the direction that they're taking our countries in, which is devastating regular working people. But again, only 11% of the American public believes anything these fuckers say. It's such a small percentage that it's like, I applaud them continuing to be so delusional because they're just going to keep making it so that less and less percentage of Americans trust them. They're going to go to alternative media. And I think that we're the ones that have to be there, go to all of the different medias that people are actually taking their ideas and news from and show how we can have a better interpretation of world events, one that makes more sense and that actually provides for us a vision of the future that is a lot better for all of us and not just for some select group of Americans that's prioritized by groypers or some shit.
I'll be really quick. Anytime you're wondering if they're telling you the truth about authoritarians, look for precisely what she just did, the mind reading, right? She said authoritarianism doesn't work because these people only care about themselves. How did she know what, whatever leader in Hungary she's talking about cares about? Is there any, has he written this? Has he said, hey, I only care about myself? No, of course not. Even the worst sort of, the people we actually refer to as dictators have things they care about other than themselves, right? The Nazi error was in believing, their race controlled everything, right? That wasn't just about one guy. I don't know. It's silly.
Yeah, I'm gonna get some super chats. I do want to share some breaking news. I saw some people in the chat already saw that's spreading everywhere today. Rest in peace to Noam Chomsky,
Oh my
who
God.
apparently just passed away. So rest in peace. No, I don't have a plan 7 for this. I just want to break this news for you guys. But Noam Chomsky, who I have disagreements with, I feel like I advance farther to the left, like Chomsky, but Chomsky's influence cannot be understated. The truths that he said about the U.S. empire, and the fact that he was even a gateway, because you guys know I was a Bernie crat. I was very liberal minded. One of the people that helped get me out of my liberal mind that I had in my teenage year was Noam Chomsky. So despite all the disagreements we may have with Chomsky regarding lesser two evils, COVID, and that kind of stuff, there's no denying that he was a massive, I think, positive influence for people who resist empire, people who want to hold the ruling class accountable. We had disagreements, but he was a massive intellectual titan that did play a role in my leftward shift. He was a pit stop. I think I'm farther left now, but he was a very, very important pit stop. So that's my words. Do you guys have anything you want to say? I don't have any planned segment. I thought it was breaking out. I want to cover it.
Rest in peace, like you said, an intellectual powerhouse, one of the great American intellectuals of the left. For me, he was an important bridge towards people like Parenti. There's still many, many rational kernels in his thought, even though we've moved beyond it as Marxist Leninists. I think that's something we would all agree. We had the pleasure of interviewing him at the Institute for our Journal of American Socialist Studies 2022 edition. And he shared tremendous insights with the questions that we asked him, and his insight is going to be missed. And it's in the last few years, although he got COVID wrong and some other areas wrong, he was getting more and more in tune with a correct position on issues such as Russia and the new Cold War against China, and the genocide of the Palestinians. And those are improvements from some of the politics that he championed during the first Cold War, where he in many ways embodied the sort of neither Moscow nor Washington sentiment, which I think was hurtful for the left in general, not just for communists, but for the overall general progressive forces. So rest in peace to a great one, and he'll be missed.
Yeah, the last honest liberal just died.
Go ahead, Noah. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead, Noah.
Oh, I said the last honest liberal just died, basically.
I think that's a fair way to put it. Chomsky had a lot of anti-communist takes that I had critiques of, but I still think his overall critique of the empire, him standing up for Israel and Palestinians. And I remember seeing those debates he had. If you guys don't know, Noam Chomsky rose to prominence because in the late 60s, like, guys, the culture in America was so much different. They used to have these nationalized debates. Like, we never had that now, right? People like Marjorie Taylor Greene challenged AOC to debate, and AOC ran like a fucking coward. Do you guys know they used to have nationally televised debates about the Vietnam War?
Mm-hmm.
And Noam Chomsky used to have these debates. Yeah. So, sorry, no, what was that?
I said his debate with Buckley, William F. Buckley. It's legendary.
Yeah, that's the one I've seen. Yeah, I'm glad you brought him up. I forgot his name. But yeah, he had these infamous debates about Vietnam, about empire thinking. That back when they used to air like intellectual content on TV. It's crazy to think that they would air a Noam Chomsky debate where he's critical of moves of the empire. But that's just how different things was even back then, right? So I was really positive because Noam had the impact he had is undeniably positive because he's got a lot of people on the right track. And those people may have progressed past him. A lot of anti-imperialist journalists, thinkers was inspired by Chomsky. So we all know the criticism of him, but I think it's a sad day to see him pass. Rest in peace, Noam Chomsky. Let me read the last two super chats, and then I'll get to the last planned segment of the day. We're going a little bit longer, but I don't plan on going any longer than 90 minutes. We just have one quick segment I would do on Ukraine and NATO. Thank you for the 23.99. I am sick of this shit. I have it better than people in the U.S. as I live in Austria. thanks to Midwestern Marx and RBN, I got rid of my liberal tendencies based. I started to Marx. I am someone who identifies with being a communist now. Base as hell. We love to see the progression, which is why it's weird when people like pull like my tweets from 2009. Like, oh look, like the whole point is progression. I'm very open about like even like in 2019, I would not have considered myself to have like liberal tendencies. But I definitely did. I didn't even know it then. I was like, nigga, I'm anti-establishment. I'm a radical, but I had liberal tendencies. I just wasn't aware of it then. That's how you grow. That's how you change. And side-eye the people who don't think those changes are legitimate. And they usually have it at the exact opposite. These people side-eye people who go through legitimate growth and change, but it should be the exact opposite. You should try side-eye the people who chastise people who grow and change. What's up with that? But anyway, last one I saw from John, who always leaves great super chats. Frankfurt Critical Theory and I want to say that Foucault, postmodernism. I always like to fuck with John because John leaves comments just so I get tongue tied. he does that on purpose. Or the ideology of bourgeoisie academia. They try to sell bourgeoisie queer feminism as a serious critique of Western imperialism. And that's the whole conversation. Well, I just had a conversation with Q about that. Q Anthony Ali. He was just on our show, just retaliating against about Zionists. I support liberation for all people. I support what a lot of radical feminists, like you guys know my sister Afeni, right? Stabby Sabs. I support these motherfuckers to the death in their politics to the death. Western feminism can fuck off though, because if I piss you off with that statement, I don't think you're a Western feminist. Western feminist ideology is a toxic scourge on humanity. Because as I learned more history, once again, I was back when I was more liberal minded. I was like, believe all women. So I'm a feminist. No, this ideology was used and is used to fund the genocide right now. This whole believe Israeli women. Imperial Western feminism is all about justifying state violence and imperialist neoliberal violence by smearing Black and brown men as sexual deviants. And once I realized that, I was like, bro, fuck this shit. When you look into the history of white feminists and how white feminists got so many Black men lynched, how there was obstacles to the civil rights movement. When I told you guys I got rid of all liberalism from my body, I decolonized my mind. I despise Western feminism. Those images you see of female IDF members. Oh, there's this famous picture of this IDF female soldier who took a picture next to this person being tortured. That's the end result of Western feminism.
Yep.
So if you want to show me some Pan-African radical feminism, I'm down with that shit, I guess. But this shit that's known as mainstream liberal feminism, fucking count me out. And my friend Q Anthony Ali, he's like, man, fuck all that shit. But I sympathize with what I think a lot of base socialist feminists say. That's why I make that distinction. But go ahead, Noah, and Carlos, if you want to chime in.
Yeah, a good rule of thumb is if it comes from our ruling class's academy, I don't care how radical it tells you it is serving the ruling class. And that's what their feminism is. That's what their queer theory is. That's what all of it is. It serves that same division that Madison was talking about stoking. Feminism that just blames men for everything and wants to separate men and women, right? Ain't about the real liberation of women from the actual oppression they suffer. It's just not, because it's getting the whole question fundamentally wrong. What really, really bothers me is all these bourgeois theories try to take ownership of these subjects as if they're the only way you can think about it. It's crazy.
And as far as the anti-Black sentiments, you hit the nail on the head there. Someone who actually came out of my university, Tommy Curry, has done a lot of good work there, expounding how Western feminism is specifically against Black men. He wrote a great book called The Man Not, where he details all of that. And we have people within our tradition that speak about the woman question. I mean, Engels and Marx, it was a central question for them. Engels called it the first form the class struggle ever took, the struggle against patriarchy. Kollontai is another must-read for all Marxists. He was a Russian Marxists that dealt heavily with the women's question. Sometimes some of them adopt the label of feminism, proletarian feminism or Marxist feminism. Sometimes they feel like just the label of Marxism encapsulates some of the essence of dealing with women's questions and the struggle against patriarchy, sexual violence, and all these other things. But we don't need to be pulling anything from the bourgeois academy, because it's their academy, their ideas, and they're destined to reproduce their order. That was an interesting comment.
Yeah, I read the super chat. I find it very interesting as well. From John the Op Fall, directly from the CIA here. As an indigenous revolutionary from the so-called America, why don't these two white nationalists on the Black Radical show from Midwestern Marx don't support national liberation for my people? So I have been in conversation with Midwestern Marx since the beginning of RBN, essentially. They have come on my shows, agree with our politics, agree with liberation from the empire, supported our demands for proletariat revolution, healthcare that would benefit and uplift our people. So when I see you invoke liberal identity politics by calling these people white nationalists based on nothing, it makes me think you're an op or a fed. Because even if you have disagreements with their position on something, how is it productive to call them a white nationalist when we actually have people who support neo-Nazis? We have Zionists who actually support a genocide of Palestinians, which they oppose, by the way. We are in the middle of a genocide, you unserious moron. So as in the middle of a genocide, you want to call people who opposing that genocide white nationalists. You want to call people who oppose funding neo-Nazis in Ukraine white nationalists. You guys see how you make words mean nothing, and while you end up doing the bidding of the establishment at the end of the day? If you have a problem with their position, how about you have a conversation with them? All these people who want to spend their time, like my previous colleague, who want to smear these people, you notice they never want to have a conversation with them because it will completely destroy the preconceptions they have of them. So you guys can take it on if you want, but I think that we always have these fucking dividers. These people who have no skin in the game. These people who just view this shit as entertainment. These people who want to make a fight. I see it all the time. When the people who try to pit me and Sabbath against each other. People like, oh, who's better between Nick and Rome? Why? Oh my God, Nick. They're not fucking serious. This person was willing to spend $10 instead of spending that on a lunch. Instead of getting yourself a fucking sandwich, what you want to do is start some drama. So you got some goddamn drama. So you need to explain how a person who's against funding Azov neo-Nazis in Ukraine is a white nationalist. People who are against the white supremacist duopoly system is a white nationalist. See, what you guys are doing is this is op behavior. This is not how you engage in a movement, even if you have disagreements with these people. And I don't agree with everything they say. I don't agree with everything you see people on my show say. But like a man, I bring them on and we talk instead of launching fucking stupid ass smear jobs. Don't stop distrusting people of the working class. I usually give people of the working class much benefit of the doubt until proven otherwise. Many of you guys do the exact opposite, where you just try to cancel motherfuckers. You guys try to find differences. You guys don't want to reach out, and you don't want to build because you guys are not builders. You're not organizers. You guys don't know how to deal with people who got disagreements with you. And it's beyond pathetic. It's beyond weak. Learn to talk and have disagreement with people instead of just calling people white nationalists, because the only thing you're doing is diluting what that word actually fucking means. Nick Fuentes, who wants an all-white state, who Midwestern Marx Eddie Liger calls out all the time, he's a white nationalist. Zionists are white nationalists. They believe in an ethno-state. What you guys are doing, you guys are diluting who our true enemy is when you guys say stupid shit like this. Do you understand?
Can I just say,
you guys take it off if you want, but it's stupid. And I'm glad that you spent $10 so I can go off on your divisive bullshit.
I just want to say that the way we call out Nick Fuentes is by saying that he is un-American, because there is no America without the black working class. We specifically say all the time, the primary form of class struggle in American history is
I talk
the
to these
black
people
freedom
all the time.
struggle.
Sorry, no, but how many times have I had Midwestern Marx on? If these motherfuckers were white nationalists, Nazis, I would have sniffed that shit out by now. I promise you to God. So you got all these people who are ops who try to paint this fucking division. I see it all the time. Former RBN members was dumb enough to fall for it. I'm not. I have conversations with people. I see where these people stand. They fight against empire. They fight against the greatest scourge of all time. But you want to call them white nationalists? Why? So you get some likes on Twitter? What is the end objective of what you're trying to accomplish? And you guys understand, this is like 70% of Twitter communists who don't organize. They don't do shit. They just get fucking dopamine hits from going after other people on the left. I am leftier than you. This person is a fraud. My job is to expose the frauds among the workers. Don't trust workers. Don't trust people who are socialists. People who are against Israel, don't trust them. That's the message you guys are sending. Don't trust people who are post-duopolists. If you're a post-duopoly, if you're a socialist, I give you grace and all the benefit of the doubt. And if you're the exact opposite, I view you as extremely suspect. Mm-hmm. You understand? So thank you for the $10. Anyone else?
Well, there he's doing, paradoxically, he's doing the bidding of the white supremacists, because if there's something that we've emphasized in our institute from the Marxist position is the importance of developing American Marxism, and all the people we pull from, at least like 95% of them are black thinkers. It's not because we want to be hip, liberal, woke people, but it's because it's been the black freedom struggle that has been at the forefront of the class struggle in the US, and some of the thinkers that have expressed the zenith of that struggle have been black thinkers like W.B. Du Bois and Winston and King to a certain extent. So it's just so completely ridiculous. And to bring up the indigenous question when we've reiterated a million times what our position is in that area and what we're critical of. Yeah, we are critical of the NDN collective and the money it receives from Bezos and of a slogan that has been captured by that. But we're not against indigenous autonomy. We're not against indigenous sovereignty. If that's what's desired, we're in favor of economic development for indigenous communities. It's a basic principle of Marxism-Leninism, and that's how we see it. And it's so funny hearing myself get called a white nationalist, because the white nationalists, I don't even think they would accept me if I was a white nationalist. I got two black grandmas.
Very unique form of white nationalism there. Very unique.
Yeah, the elusive Cuban white nationalist, right?
They want to diversify the white nationalists. That's what they want.
White nationalists who want to associate with black communists is definitely unique.
Who called Du Bois the father of American Marxism?
we have the heads of Marxism, and we go from Marx, Engels, Lenin, Du Bois. Like, it's an institute that does that. To call it white nationalists is something.
You guys know I have very little tolerance for stupidity, right? So if you want to spend me $10 and air off your stupidity, I'm more than happy to debunk it. I dislike anti-intellectualism. It does not serve us. The message these people try to spread, this mistrust of workers. You can disagree, people. You guys know I love a debate. I debate my friends on this show all the time. We had disagreements. And if that's not how you handle these disagreements, with talking it out, trying to learn from each other, but instead just immediately smear a name, I think you are an op, because you're literally engaged in CIA tactics. But we can move on. I'm not gonna spend too much time because there's not a lot of time that needs to be spent on this segment. But I do want to touch on this. This is funny. Let's cover some Russia and Ukraine for our last bit of the show. So Ukraine is probably one of the best examples, and I really hope Taiwan is paying attention. I think the majority of the population is. That's why majority of the population voted against the separatist-leaning party, who not really completely separatist, but they do got very concerning rhetoric. But a lot of people in Taiwan is learning that Ukraine was essentially used as a sacrifice. And Che Boas, who I had on last week, who highlights this, explains how when you look at Europe, when you look at the West in general, they view Ukrainians as cockroaches. You know how they hate Russians? Well, we know that around what is it, 1/3? I think it's higher than that, actually. I think Zoya corrected me on that before. I think it's higher than 1/3 of Ukrainian people speak Russian. Like Russia is very closely tied to their culture, and it's hilarious that the neo-Nazis in Ukraine thought that the West would love them and accept them because they decided to wage war against those ethnic Russians. Oh, you sweet summer child. So after witnessing an entire generation of Ukrainian men get wiped out, Ukraine trying their best to degrade Russia and failing. Only thing that's happened is Russia's modernized the military. After everything that Ukraine has done for the arms industry, you had Zelensky fight against peace, Ukraine politicians fight against peace. Despite all this stuff, the West still refused to let them join NATO. And it's weird because you guys willing to risk nuclear war for Ukraine, even though they technically not even an ally? You want to go to war with Russia when they just want a neutral Ukraine? When you're not even giving the NATO invitation, it's almost like you wagging this in their face just to promote Russia, almost. So now listen to what John Kirby said here, because he was essentially approached by this. Because Ukraine, the biggest cucks in European history, who essentially sacrificed their entirety of their men, not even getting a guarantee that they're going to join NATO. And essentially they're not going to join NATO because John Kirby and the Biden administration are like, hey, you guys can join NATO after you defeat the Russians. No, that shit is not going to happen. Anyway, let's continue.
Talked about. First, they got to win this war. Right? They got to win the war first. And so, number one, we're doing everything we can to make sure they.
So, in order to join NATO, this is what we got for you, Ukraine. In order to join NATO, you got to be one of the world's biggest nuclear powers for us. We don't really appreciate it, champ. Do anyone really believe these people give a fuck about Ukrainians? But I'll let it finish. I'll pass to you guys.
And so, number one, we're doing everything we can to make sure they can do that. Then when the war's over, no matter what it looks like, they're still going to have a long border with Russia and a legitimate security threat to the Ukrainian people. That's why the president at the G7 signed our bilateral security agreement, joining what some other 14, 15 others talked about.
Well, you gotta see, I'll pass to you guys for your thought, but you gotta see, this is what Ukraine need to do to defeat NATO. Just a small little task.
First, they got to win this war.
What a deal. Carlos, Noah.
You know, there's an expression. It's bad to be an enemy of the U.S. empire, but sometimes it's a hell of a lot worse to be its friend. Because these people are just getting tossed into the meat grinder, Nick. You know, hundreds of thousands of dead. I mean, a lot of them were, of course, these Banderist scum that were Nazis. But a lot of them are just regular people, as we have in our nations, probably not that involved in politics, conscripted to go into a battlefield where in places like Bakhmut, I saw Slava was in the comments. She mentioned this in the interview we did with her. In places like Bakhmut, the average survival time was 4 hours. Can you imagine getting thrown into a battlefield where the average survival time is 4 hours? You don't even get 24 hours to survive when you're thrown in. It's so completely sad. It's a whole people being completely destroyed, tossed into the meat grinder of war. Why? To advance the geopolitical interests of the U.S. empire when it's visibly crumbling, when it's not going to win. What it's doing is it's realizing that it's falling and it's trying to grab onto anything it can and bring potentially all of us with it down, because it just okayed recently using American weapons by Ukraine to target Russia inside Russia. That's the premise for World War III, nuclearized World War III. It just lifted the ban that it had on sending weapons to the 8th Azov Brigade under the auspices that the brigade is no longer the same one from 2014 that all of mainstream media in the West recognized was Nazi and basically had a
The Nazis reformed themselves, Carlos.
They're not Nazis because they're not a battalion anymore.
Right. They changed from battalion to brigade, which is kind of necessary when you get incorporated officially into the Ukrainian armed forces. But because of that name change, now they're no longer Nazis. It's the same people. They still got the swastika tattoos. They still got the Hitler mustache man tattoos. But now they're no longer Nazi because they switched from battalion or brigade to battalion. Like, it's so completely absurd, but they're bringing all of humanity down with it. They're literally tiptoeing us into potentially the Third World War with nuclear bombs on each side. It's extremely scary. And all that the American people are fed are lies, with the exception of channels such as ours and RBN and other people in our orbit. And look, it's you know, to reiterate the sentiment that Luxembourg already expressed a long time ago, we literally have two roads ahead of us. More of this barbarism, because barbarism is already here, or socialism. That's literally the only two roads we got. We either get socialism, dismantle the U.S. empire, become a pole in this new multipolar world, or we continue down the route of bringing humanity down just because the elite doesn't want to let go of its imperial interests and hubris.
Yeah, I think scary isn't strong enough. It's fucking terrifying. Fucking terrifying. And I think it's should be a wake-up call for all of us who've been on the fence. Should I get involved? I don't know. I don't know where to go, whatever. Do it now. Because if we don't win, it will be worse. But I wanna on the point of these Ukrainian Nazis, think about this. They've been telling them the US has your back since World War II. Right? They did the same name switcheroo thing to Waffen SS divisions, saying, "Oh no, there's some Ukrainian National Brigade or whatever they thought of to call them." They were Waffen SS, and they got them. They brought them over here, integrated them into NATO and all kinds of other stuff, or the State Department especially. But since then, they've been trying to use Ukrainians against Russia. That's always been the goal. They were funding stay-behind units like the Galen Group, right, to try to bring down the Soviet Union. And then kept them going. Finally, these Nazis think it's all going to pay off. And look what they're doing to their own people. They're slaughtering them, an entire generation of men gone. Yeah. How, over that many decades, how are none of these idiot Nazis going, you guys think the U.S. might be using us? I don't know.
Now, what's the logic in this, guys? Because we all know, because the New York Times is finally writing about the peace deal. I have a hotspot video coming out on this here very soon. The peace deal they tanked, where essentially Russia just asked for a neutral Ukraine. Hey, man, stop trying to join NATO. That's all we want. So then the West said, hey, yo, Ukraine, you can't join NATO yet. Why would you do this other than if you want to provoke Russia? Why would Sweden and Finland join NATO? The only thing that will irk the ire of Russia. Other than, like, they're doing it just to provoke Russia, because there's literally no other reason to do this other than to provoke Russia. Because they will say, oh, we have to join NATO in order to be safe. You joining NATO is what led to this conflict. It will lead to peace. But it will say, well, we don't join NATO. There's nothing we can do if Russia attacks us. The United States is helping you despite the fact that you're not in NATO. So if Finland and Sweden was invaded, by the way, you guys know they get security insurances as members of the EU, Finland and Sweden. Mm-hmm. So if Finland and Sweden was invaded by Russia, do you guys really think Europe wouldn't do anything about it? It will be Ukraine on steroids. So they are de facto NATO, if you think about it. They are de facto NATO, since we know we will have their back no matter what. So what was the point of them actually joining the alliance other than formally essentially declaring war against Russia? That's the only thing that will make Russia upset with them. You guys understand? Now, so first thing, time, because I didn't plan on going this long. I want to respect your guys' time. What I'm gonna do a quick presentation and the last part, and then we end it there. So there's only one more part I gotta share. And I have a hotspot video while I explain this more, so it doesn't have to be a long segment. You have NATO doing essentially what they accuse Russia of doing. Russia never said that they were going to use nuclear weapons, by the way. That's a lie. They always said that their modus operandi is consistent with their nuclear code, which meaning we will not use nuclear weapons until the motherland is in dire threat. So when they say Putin is nuclear saber rattling, that is essentially the West admitting that they intend to put Russia in dire threat. You guys understand? Mm-hmm. Now, what NATO is doing is essentially saying that nuclear weapons is on the table, because what NATO is doing now is deploying their nuclear stockpiles. And in an interview, when he was asked about NATO deploying their nuclear stockpiles, Jens Stoltenberg essentially said, we have to send a message and let everyone know that we are a nuclear alliance. Why the hell will you say that? There's essentially a mob boss essentially say, hey, man, it would be a shame if I was to use this gun and shoot you. It would be a shame if I use this gun, right? That's essentially what NATO is doing to Russia and the world. If we have these nukes here, and if we don't have our way, if we're not able to defeat Russia and China, it would be a shame if we were to demonstrate how exactly we are a nuclear alliance. Here's the quote exactly. It is important that NATO communicate the direct message that we, of course, are a nuclear alliance. What can you possibly mean by that? Other than a direct threat of war. And I have a segment that I'm cutting. I'm gonna cover this later. It's a longer CNN segment where they essentially asked Jens Stoltenberg, like, bro, why do you say that? That's literally a crazy thing to say, because how will Russia interpret that other than a nuclear threat, which is exactly what the Kremlin interpreted it as. Here's Russia. Kremlin calls NATO chief's nuclear weapons remark an escalation of tension. You have NATO that is ready to deploy tens of thousands of troops. NATO said they're ready to deploy. So what is the message of the Biden administration now that they have Emmanuel Macron saying that he's willing to engage in the ground war with Russia? You have NATO and Jens Stoltenberg saying that he wants a nuclear conflict with Russia. How is the Biden administration responding? They're comfortable with it. We all right with this. This is going to be good for Raytheon. Look at this. White House comfortable with its nuclear position after NATO chief suggests increase in deployment of weapons. The ruling class is about to get all of us murdered over Ukraine, my friends. Why is everyone not screaming on this? So that's my last quick presentation. Sorry for going a little bit longer than I planned, but I'm going to give Carlos and Noah opportunity for last thoughts, and we begin to wrap up at the super chat.
These people swear it's still the 1940s, and they could just drop two horrendous nukes on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and just get away with it. That's not the case anymore. A lot of the BRICS country, which are united with Russia, are also nuclear powers. They're tiptoeing us into a Holocaust where no one is going to come out of it alive. Not the rich, not the poor. If nuclear bombs start dropping, it's done for humanity. Is that something we're willing to endure as a people? Are we willing to continue to let this parasitic, evil ruling class tiptoe humanity into nuclear devastation? Or do we want to actually fucking do something about it and stop it? Because honestly, we're the only ones who can. It's our demented leaders who are doing all of this. It's our leaders, the same motherfuckers that keep us poor, indebted, and desperate, that are doing this, that are escalating humanity into nuclear World War III. It's up to us to change it. So all of those people that come in the comments or on Twitter dividing, no. If division is the plan of the elite, because they know that when you divide, you keep people weak and you're able to beat them. You're able to control them, divide and rule. Then unity should be our response. If you're against imperialism, if you don't want our government, which is leaving the people hanging them dry, to continue doing this, we have to unite and focus on this as the principal contradiction at hand. And that's the truth. If you have social positions on certain cultural issues that are different than mine, okay, we can talk about those at some other time. But if you want to stop the war machine that is leading humanity to its death, as you said, Nick, we have to unite. That's the only way we can beat these fuckers. And they'll do it. They're stupid enough to do it.
Yep.
We would be fools to think that they're not stupid enough to do it. I think they're stupid enough to do it.
Yeah. I want to reiterate that it's fucking terrifying. And that we're at a point here where we need to get serious. Right? We need to create an atmosphere where people who toss out these random like crazy lies, like the guy that just thank you on Nick's behalf for the $10, right? Where
that's
that
a name
kind
I've
of
never
thing,
seen on the channel before, by the way. A new name, never seen on the channel. Pay $10 because they follow Midwestern March around calling them names. Never seen that commenter ever on the show. I recognize these people after a while. Never seen them on the show before. They just follow Midwestern March around, just smearing them. Like that's shady to me. Like you guys don't think that's some shit that CIA or like people would do? Like I see, like I have, and I'm not trying to brag, but I have 127,000 followers on Twitter. I've been through so much shit. I've seen ops run against me. Like I've seen like the most insane like campaigns ways to destroy me, especially by the Bernie left after I was very critical of Bernie and AOC. I saw it in real time. Like a lot of people follow me. The operations, like the people who follow me and smear me. You guys saw the person who trying to lie about my COVID record. Like there's all these people who they like, bro. They are definitely like some sort of fucking op. What worker spends time following people around, smearing them? I don't trust it. And I know how the CIA operates. I know the infiltration manual. And I don't have to give you benefit of the doubt. You don't have to be CIA. If you move like CIA, if you operate like CIA, if it walks, if it quacks like a duck, it's a goddamn duck. Like, so I call people out as ops when I see it. I know the patterns. Normal working class people who got rent to pay, they got shit going on in their lives. They're not following a random group called Midwestern Marx, leaving super chats and shit just to talk shit on. That is not what people do. I just don't believe it. If you walk like an op, you act like an op, I'm gonna treat you like a goddamn op. That's not. I got people I dislike. I got people who I'm like, dude, how the fuck do they got a following? Do I go around leaving super chats dissing them on their channel? That's absurd to do. There's not a single fucking worker I believe that would do that. So when I see people do that, I assume they're CIA because that's what a rational-minded person would do, knowing how CIA operates, right? So if you leave those comments, I'm gonna take your $10. I'm gonna assume you're CIA. That's just simply how it works.
And even if you're not,
for that, people like, hey Nick, so you essentially calling people like who criticize you CIA? You don't deserve any benefit of doubt. Let me repeat this. People, these motherfuckers don't deserve any benefit of doubt. If you look at what is done in the CIA manual to divide left movements and you do that shit, it does not matter if you're CIA or not. I'm going to call you out for engaging in CIA op tactics at the end of the day. So we don't have to address it no more. That's my overall thoughts. Any last thoughts? Any final thoughts, Noah? And we can. I
just want to say we need to create an atmosphere of exactly what Nick is describing here. People coming around with that shit and you give them the boot immediately. Nuclear holocaust is on the horizon. It's time to put away the childish games. I don't like him. He doesn't like me. If there isn't some immediate impediment to the working class taking power, then we need to get together and just do it. Because time's running out, people. Like, it's getting late.
Yeah, it is. Like, I'm actually we can wrap it there. I don't have tolerance for this shit. Like, I'm 33 years old, and most of these leftists I see online, they treat this shit like it's high school. And if you guys haven't noticed, I am so done with the high school mentality on the left. So fucking done.
For real.
So fucking done. People who treat this shit like a social club. This shit is not a social club to me. This shit is serious. I seriously care about uplifting my family. I have medical debt in my family. I'm trying to make sure it never happens to people again. I have people I know who was victim of police violence. I am trying to end this shit. You privileged motherfuckers who just treat this shit like a team sport, like a fucking high school social club, like many people do. I am beyond done with that. Which is why we start launching this new era. But with this, I really do gotta wrap up. Thank you guys for joining. Make sure you guys check out sorry. I saw 3 more super chats. I don't want to skip you guys. A little bit premature. Thank you for the 199 Janice. Decent collaboration. RBN and Midwestern Marx. More of this. We had Midwestern Marx on quite a few. You guys are gonna see a lot of them in the new era because we all about conversating with people, even those we disagree with, right? Thank you for the 999 Slava. My thing is, bro, I had you guys on like what 4 or 5 times now, and I'll be like base. People watch me like base. Then I see people say all this shit about Midwestern Marx. Like, bro, what are you guys? Have you guys talked to these people? Like, I see the same thing because guys, I've been through it, guys. After I left the Bernie movement, bro, you guys should have seen the smears that came from by me. That Majority Report was propping them up. Anna was propping them up. Voss was propping it up. Remember during the Jones Strike Summit, bro? There was the giant when we had the Jones Strike Summit. It was trending on Twitter, and I saw the giant campaign against RBN. That was crazy. Like, it was extremely coordinated. You had Hassan Piker, the largest Twitch streamer in the world, who came out with an attack on us, repeating smears. It was a crazy op. So after living through this shit, after living through these ops, I see it coming from a mile away. And I get very confused when I see you guys engage in it. You know what I mean? Because I've been through it before. And I see people try to do the same thing to other people who simply challenge an empire. So it doesn't make sense to me. But anyway, let me read the last two super chats I saw. Most Ukrainians are forced to fight. They don't want to die for Zelensky. Well said. People, the forced
Slava's from Ukraine. She's awesome. We love Slava.
Yeah. Base Slava. This is our friend Colin. Thanks for 999. How does Midwestern Marx plan to reach out to the Black community or communities in color in general? What the institutes plan to take the theory people learn and tangibly apply it to their lives? I think that's a great question. I think it's a good way to end the live stream. Thank you for the super chat. So now this is a good faith question here. You guys, this is legitimately probing into their mind, and you get an answer and see where they're coming from. You guys see how the assumption isn't that Carlos is somehow a white nationalist. Anyway, good. I think this is a good faith question. Let's wrap it with this. I'll pass it to Noah and then Carlos this time.
Yeah, I think one of the things that bothers me about the middle class liberal left is that they're really focused on this question to a point that it's like sort of white chauvinist, right? Like Black people can't have their own leadership, right? And their own organization that we ally with and work with, like this collaboration right here, right? We don't make like a sort of special effort to reach out to the Black community because I don't know if it's our place to do so, but we are open for everyone from the Black community who wants to come to us to help learn Marxism, etc. Our classes are the most diverse thing I've ever seen in my life. Versus, I spent years in the Communist Party, and it was a bunch of white people sitting around going, why aren't there more Black people in the Cleveland Communist Party? And unable to wrap their heads around that fact of the way they carry themselves, this sort of middle class way they have about doing things is the problem. It's very sort of infantilizing, in my opinion.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I heard this like even at the recent CPUSA convention. They're like, how do we get more Black people or more women? And it's like when you're asking that question, you're asking what are we doing that is not bringing more people on board. And I think our classes are a good representation of who our audience is because it means people are following us close enough to give us money and show up like 8 weeks in a row to learn, to build, and our classes are extremely diverse, very representative of the general population of America. And it's always funny because we get these smears of being white nationalists. And the groups that we operate with are just extremely diverse. And to be frank, like I see our institute as just a component in this larger revival of communism. I think RBN's a part of it. We have other friends like Infrared that are a part of it, other groups, Revolution Report, Slava was in the comments, DD Geopolitics, a revival of like the old school left, the focus on the bread and butter issues that everyone's a part of. So I think as a general movement, this question is being addressed. Of course, I think RBN is at the forefront here. But yeah, I think it's something that's going to happen organically. Like all the people we pull from the U.S., American theorists, most of them are Black. I have a book coming out this week, Why We Need American Marxism. The main American Marxists I pull from are folks that have been within the Black freedom struggle. That's our framework of thought. And again, it's not because we're thinking, how can we be hip and woke? It's because it's true. The forefront of the class struggle has been the Black freedom movement. Marx called racism the secret through which the ruling class protects its interests, keeps itself in power. So of course you got to fight racism. It's a form of class struggle. It's not this separate. It's a form the class struggle has taken the forefront. And the people who have thought through the questions of the color line, through the questions of racism, have been at the forefront of thinking about the class struggle in the U.S. And that's what American Marxism means. It means taking the general insights of Marxism, applying them to the particular conditions of that they have taken in the U.S. And that's been the struggle against the color line at the forefront. So if that's the angle that our institute has, I think it's organic that our classrooms are so diverse, and I think that involvement from Black communities is only going to continue to grow. The Black community has been at the forefront of the class struggle. So if we see our collective effort as something that's waging a conscious communist class struggle, they're going to be there.
That's why I think there's this coordinated effort that I've noticed to try to peel Midwestern Marx away from RBN. They try to. That's why there's a coordinated effort to smear Midwestern Marx as white nationalists, even though they literally have Carlos in their group, for example. Despite the fact they literally against empire and against the politics of the large majority of white America. Because Midwestern Marx, as you guys see how well we connect in our conversation, has the politics that Black America is looking for. As I said, Black America is the largest driver of socialism in this country. So knowing that Black people are the largest driver of socialism, what do the ops do? Let's paint Midwestern Marx and white nationalists so the Black people don't start talking with them. I'm not dumb enough to fall for that. I'm not dumb enough to fall for that. So that's why I reach out to them. I have a great conversation with them. We learn a lot from each other. And regarding this super chat, I'm taking a slightly different approach. I appreciate the question, Carl. I'm going to say it like this because I think integration was a mistake. And I'm speaking as a Black man here. The idea, and this is me purging all my liberalism out of me, right? The idea that we go to white people and beg them to stop being racist. Please accept me in your institutions. I want to be a war criminal too. I want to exploit labor too. I want to be in management. Promote me. How has that worked for us? The only thing that we got are Black capitalists who exploit Black labor. We got people like Colin Powell who climbed the ladders. We have people like Hakeem Jeffries who climbed the ladder who had a kiss of Zionist ring. Integration was a giant mistake. Instead of begging white people to like us, I don't give a fuck if you guys don't like me because I'm Black. When I see Nick Fuentes complaining about Black people living in America, I'm like, no, you can't stop me. I don't care if you don't like me. I'm Black, and you can. I legitimately don't care. Like if white people don't like me, it's hilarious to me. I'm here. You gotta deal with it. The last thing we should be doing is spend our time convincing white people to like us. You want to know whose job I think that is? White allies. So I don't believe in integration, but we have white allies who are down with the cause, down with the culture, who want to be at the cookout. We open the door and we say, welcome, brother. And you want to know who's going to convert the racist white people? It's not us. I'm not interested. It's not our job to go down in Joplin, Missouri, where the KKK is at, and beg them not to be racist. You want to know whose job it is? With all due respect, Noah's. It's white people's job to talk to their racist family members. That's something that liberals, they completely rejected that responsibility. So what liberals would do, they say, I cut off my racist family members. I don't talk to certain racist white people. Motherfuckers, that's your job. Do you guys remember all the people got mad at Jimmy Dore for having a Boogaloo Boy on their show? And then people like, hey, Nick, why you still like Jimmy Dore? Don't you know he had a Boogaloo Boy on the show? I said, that's what white people, that's exactly what you're supposed to be doing. Your job is to invite the Boogaloo Boy on the show and convince them not to be racist. That's your job. It is not the job of Black people. So sorry for my last rant. If you guys want to chime in with anything else, I think it was a good, very thought-provoking super chat. Thank you, Colin. Yeah. I give you guys final thoughts. I know you guys want to say anything.
I just want to say one thing. I'm sorry. I've been like chomping at the bit for it.
No. It's fun.
You're absolutely right. I have 2 points. One, when I first started organizing, when I was young, right? I went to this, I guess it was like a meetup, whatever it was, but there was an ex-Panther there, right? It was on the west side of Cleveland. I'm from the east side, which is sort of Cleveland's super segregated. The east side's the Black neighborhoods, west side is the white. But this was on the west side, so it was mostly white people. And you have a guy asking this ex-Panther, he's like, so how can we white people help the Black struggle, right? And the guy looks at him and he says exactly what you said. Go convince white people to not be racist. That's what we want from you. And I took that to heart, right? And let me tell you, it works. It fucking works. I have gotten every Trump voting guy who, thought like immigrants were the problem, whatever, at my workplace to be on board for communism, right? Especially what we call American communism, which is all the distinct and different communities within this country working together in our own interests. And it works.
Sorry. Go ahead. My bad, man.
No, it's all right. It's all right.
Any last thoughts?
I couldn't agree. This ideology of diverse faces in high places paint it as emancipation, it's complete bunk. It just digs us deeper in the hole. I think it could play a necessary role in helping us realize that, the struggle for Black emancipation or general emancipation for working people, both of which are tied in the U.S., cannot be reduced to diversifying the elite, diversifying the news anchors telling us lies, or diversifying the political class, or that's not what's going to solve the question of, struggling and fighting for our freedom as working people, as oppressed communities. I think there's a rational kernel in integration, not at that level, but at the level of the integration of workplaces, of places in civil society, because racism is so irrational. It's so based on an abstraction of what Black people are, that once you're able to hang out with just regular Black people, it destroys it. So I think that although, I think we would all share similar critiques of the limitations of BLM, its integration into the Democratic Party, etc., what I saw in that was 25 to 30 million Americans, a lot of them which were white, going out and feeling like when they killed George Floyd, they killed one of us. That sentiment didn't happen in 1960. They killed King. They killed Malcolm. They killed Hampton. And we didn't see anywhere near the numbers that we saw in 2020. And I
King
think
was
that's
the most hated man in America when they killed him.
I think that's in part that effort of, actually being able to be around each other and seeing that what we have in common is a hell of a lot more than what we have different. And I couldn't agree with you more. It's the task of white communists to convince racist white workers operating under false consciousness, because that's what it is. It's so superficial, that their real enemy is the capitalist class, which today is more and more being racially diversified. Henry Winston had a great line: the capitalist class doesn't divide itself by colors. And I think that's more and more true today, as they're trying to paint this form of quote unquote woke version of capitalism. By the way, I just also wanted to mention, for the folks interested and in the Chicago area, I'll be next month with Slava and the Revolution Report people in Chicago, presenting on my forthcoming book, Why We Need American Marxism. So if you're interested in some of these ideas, please make sure to check that out. You can hit up the Revolution Report folks for the address. We're not putting the address out there for obvious reasons, but it should be fun. And thank you so much again, Nick, for having us on. It's been a real treat, brother.
I planned for an hour, but we did 2 just because it was very thought-provoking conversation, as always with Midwestern Mark. Once again, I always have great conversation, and that's just how I am. When I see people who are anti-capitalist, who are Marxists like me, I'm way more likely to get along with them and try to pick their brain and see how we can organize, and assume that they're white nationalists for some reason. You know what I mean? So another great conversation. Hope you guys enjoyed it as well. We have the Sabby and JB show. I'm not going live tomorrow. I got a guest spot on Belly of the Beast at this time, so I can't do my regularly planned Nick at noon tomorrow. But I will be live on Friday with a guest I can't remember. Unfortunately, I don't have my schedule with me, but you guys know our friend Zoya's Life is Cooking. I'm kicking myself like, fuck, I got a pretty good guest on Friday. I can't remember though, so I will be live on Friday though. Damn, I'm blanking on my whole guest. But guys, I got so many banger after banger. I got a hotspot coming out here very soon. So much shit's going on, bro. It's chaotic as hell at RBN. Make sure you guys subscribe. I appreciate you guys for watching. Check out Midwestern Marx as well. Take care. Have a good one, guys.